I want to start by thanking all the people who made this event possible. This was a group and community effort. And without the community of people who stepped forward to create this space with us, this weekend would not have happened. So I've tried to collect some acknowledgements, and I apologize in advance if I'm forgetting anybody, but I'd like to just do some shout-outs really quickly. First of all, I would like to thank our Tea Crew. Thank you, Tea Crew. They are an Oakland-based tea collective, the Full Circle Tea House, and they've been awesome serving tea for us. Thank you very much. We'd also like to thank Chef Emma Sanchez for feeding us. She's fed us really beautiful food, and for that we're grateful, and I believe she will perhaps keep feeding us through the after party if we're lucky. I'd also really like to thank our registration crew, Andrea, Violet Devine. Yeah, they've been really awesome, and they received you really beautifully, and we thank them for that. I'd also like to thank our safety crew, Z and Dragon. Could you wave your hands? Right, holding our container beautifully, thank you very much. And if anybody needs an escort out of here today, please ask one of these people. They will help you, as they have been doing all weekend. I would also like to thank the people who did the social media and promotion for this event. In particular, Hannah Neal and Tanya Abdul. Yes. And I'd also special thanks to Tanya for being our stage manager. That was a hard job, and thanks. I would also like to thank the Omni. Rob, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Apologies to Fat Beats for inadvertently taking their tables. They took them back. And we're working it out, and we support them as well. They did their thing out here yesterday, which was great. We'd also like to thank Lynn Howe from the Omni, who is our contact person, and she's been terrific. It's been a real pleasure being here in Oakland with everybody. We'd also like to thank some of our sponsors, especially the Psychedelic Society folks over there. Yep. Sage Integrative Health, yes, support them. Of course, Dr. Frank Lucido and Maria Mangini. Woo! Right, support your local community healthcare providers. They provide us excellent care, and for that we're grateful. I'd also like to thank some of our other sponsors. MAPS has been a sponsor of this event, and we have members of that community here as well. Yep. I'd also like to thank our videographers and photographers. Willard over here has been awesome. Cheddar over here has manned the camera that way, and we have two photographers, Chris Pezza and John Maybe. Thank you for being our photographers. I'd like to thank Jane Strait for bringing the plant altar. And I'd also like to thank everyone who is about to help us strike out of here, because the Omni needs this space at 3 to make way for another group who's coming in, and we want to be respectful of their space. So we're asking that if we're going to wrap up our program by about 1:30. Anybody who is here left in this space, please help us clean this space and honor this space, and honor the collectives that work in this space, the people who will come in after us in this space. We like to think of ourselves as a Leave No Trace event, even though we're collecting garbage over there. We will clean this space and return it. And if you can help us do that, that would be awesome. I'd also really like to thank our speakers. We had an amazing group of speakers here this past weekend, and they have brought us on a journey together. And I would just like to thank everyone who spoke, especially people who came from a long distance to be here. Yeah. I would also like to thank the other members of the collectives in this building who have graciously welcomed us, and members of those collectives have been here during the weekend. I'm going to stop here for a second and figure out who I forgot to mention. Who did I forget to mention? Who did I forget to mention? I'm sure that I forgot to mention somebody. The board. Oh yeah, the board. Right. The board of the WVC is an awesome group of people, and we're going to come up here at the very end and personally say a few words. But I'd like to thank Carolyn Garcia, who is our first board president. Yep. Woo. And she has come from a long ways. And we have a group of emeritae, past board members, advisors, elders who hold us in their wisdom. And in addition to Carolyn, of course, Ann Shulgin was here yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, Diana Slattery, Dennis Berry. We have quite a group of advisors and emerita, and we look forward to including more people on that board. It's an open process. People come in, people serve, people step aside, and other people come in to fill that space. I'd also like to thank the present board members, especially our elder board member, Maria Mangini. Yep. And also Danielle Schumacher. Thank you, Danielle, our newest board member. Who has been ably emceeing all day today. And I'd like to close this session with some thoughts about this organization, and a couple remarks about what I was going to talk about yesterday. I was going to talk about some work I do with risk reduction and conflict resolution, and it just seemed like it was more important just to cede that time to create more spaciousness and opportunity for conversation. So I'd like to include a few thoughts about that. But first I want to point out that this event has been in hiatus for 3 years, and we brought it back, right, with a community effort. Yeah, which could not have happened without all the people I just mentioned. I organized the first Women's Congress in 2007 because I felt that the voices of women were being marginalized in the psychedelic community and in many other communities. And you know, I could have just sat with that righteous anger because I had plenty of it, but you know, I don't think it would have solved the problem. I mean, I'm really in touch with my righteous anger, believe me, but I'm a practical person. I'm interested in pragmatic solutions, and so instead of stewing or writing angry things, I did some of that, but I do believe that if you want to change the world, throw a better party, you know, and invite everyone to that party. Right. So we threw a party at Harbin. Did I say Harbin? Oh, rest in peace. We threw a party at Wilbur Hot Springs in 2007, and we just inverted what was happening at that time, where it was almost all men being invited to speak about psychedelics at big conferences, and a small number of women. I had just been to the World Psychedelic Forum in Basel, Switzerland, run by a group called Gaia, and there were 80 men speaking and 4 women, right? And so all the women were caucusing in the hallways and going, what is going on? And so I knew all these cool women, and so I just decided to throw a party, and 25 women came and spoke. And that following year, in 2008, we had formed the Women's Visionary Council, the nonprofit that runs this event, and has been running this event for a decade until we went into our hiatus, and many other workshops and gatherings in the US and Canada, in Vancouver, in Seattle, in Santa Fe, in New York City. We've been bringing this to other communities, and of course also to Cleveland, where the Women's Entheogenic Conference welcomed us, and we went to them. And I hope more of that happens. Thank you, Kai Wingo, for connecting us. That was a powerful moment. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought someone had a question. Right. So I want to say that when we formed this event in 2007, none of that felt safe, right? Now, we were a group of, I think, almost entirely at that time white women, and we didn't have nearly the kind of safety concerns that people who are people of color, other communities had because of our privilege. However, it was a little touch and go, right? Where women were perceived as soft targets. We didn't know what kind of blowback we were going to get because we're drug-using women, right? And we're targeted. And we had to stand our ground. And we had to just say, okay, we're going to gather and we're going to exercise our First Amendment rights to gather and to speak. And we're going to create a space for other women to speak and be respected in that space. And we did. We had a bail fund, people, right? Like, we didn't know what was going to happen. We really didn't. And like I said, we don't take, because of our privilege, as many risks as a lot of other people do, but we took some risks, right? And we had to. None of it was safe, right? And some of it's still not safe, despite all the political progress that's been made. So we had to just kind of, pick ourselves up and move forward for the next 10 years, and that's just what we did, because we were outlaws, because we were despised people, and we just made it work, right? Because we had community, and that's what made it safe for us. So I think that looking back, we have largely succeeded in our initial mission of amplifying the voices of women in this community. Back 13 years ago, that wasn't the case, but I think that we have arguably played an important role in amplifying the voices of women. And now when you go to a conference and these topics are discussed, guess what? There are a whole lot more women being represented, speaking, being heard, and I think we can take some credit for that. Yeah. So while we've succeeded in that initial goal, we have a lot more progress to make. We've got a lot of challenges ahead of us. As Lenice was just saying, we need to do coalition building, we need to build trust, we need to express and receive genuineness from each other, and that's going to take time. And it's not going to always be easy, and I just want to thank everyone here for their generosity and their kindness and their willingness to hear other people, because I think that's really important. Remember, we started this organization because we weren't being heard, right? So we have to be open to hearing other people. I think that's really the essence of what we need to do for each other. right? And part of that was moving this event to Oakland. We had to make this event less expensive. We had to make it accessible. We had to come off our mountaintop in Petaluma, which was beautiful, but we had to come here and be open and be part of other communities and be accessible. And I think we're on our way to doing that. And I'm hoping that that continues to evolve. The second challenge I think we're facing as a community is addressing conflict within our community. And I think that this is really important. And I think we're living in a historic period of intense social conflict and justified rage about oppression against women, against queer communities, against people of color, people who use drugs, people who can't afford housing here in the Bay Area, people who are under-resourced. There's a lot of rage, and I think a lot of it's justified, right? And I think that we need to hold space for that rage. And I understand this rage pretty well myself. I'm a privileged person, but I have a lot of rage against sexual violence, right? I want to talk about consent for a second. I have been assaulted twice, and I have a lot of anger about that. And I want to create a world where that doesn't happen, and where people are safer, and we can seek justice for people who've been harmed, right? So I want to talk about that just for a little bit, because this is, I think, a really important thing in our community and in a lot of other communities. Now, I'm a practical person, and in the last 3 years I took off from doing this event. I have been working with other communities to co-create risk reduction and conflict resolution systems. And I invite you as a community, as members of our community, to co-create a system with us, right? Because this is really important work, and it's got to be a collective process, right? And so in the last 3 years, I've been working with other psychedelic communities, right? Some of those communities are big, thousands of people. Some of them are small. And what we've been doing is we've been co-creating a system of restorative justice that is true to the values of that particular community, creating a series of protocols that are broad enough that allow for communities to adapt some basic protocols and make them their own. Because I don't think that every community can use the same protocols. I think every community has a right to set their own protocols for conflict resolution that is true to their value system, that is true to their communities. And I think this is really important work, not just for people who've been assaulted, but for all kinds of conflict, right? So we've been putting together, co-creating a system of addressing risk, reducing risk, and addressing conflict. And I'd like to talk just a little bit more about how we do that and how some of these ideas that we've been working on for 3 years could be adapted for the WVC and for other communities who might be interested in adopting some of these protocols for themselves and deciding how it works in their own community. This is not like follow these protocols. There are some ideas that have been working in these communities, might be helpful to you, you adapt them, right? So that's basically kind of what we've been doing. Just the thing about risk reduction, some of the ideas that we've tested out in these communities are going to feel really familiar to you, right? Many of the communities I work with don't serve or sell alcohol, right? We don't base our business model on serving an inferior drug to the people we love and making money off it, right? Right. Instead, we have a tea house, right? Thank you for grounding us in plant medicines. Tea is plant medicine, and this is an important thing. Some other things that we do, we organize a ranger crew, wow, to help hold the space, right? And we have done that here. They're volunteers from our community. They reflect our values. They're our safety team. We feed each other nutritious food. This, too, is risk reduction. Another big shout out to Emma and her crew, right? There is a deep connection between food and farmers and our wellness and our connection to the land, and I hope that was clear in the people who spoke here, right? Is that clear? We have to honor those people, those farmers, those food producers, those food workers, and really understand that they are essential to our wellness, right? At our events in other communities, we also have our version of the Zendo, where people can be held and received if they're having a difficult time. And I want to thank the people who were here this weekend, who are therapists and counselors, who were able to hold some of us as we were having challenging moments. Thank you. Could we have a round of applause for those people? Right, and our elders. You know, we're a community that respects our elders, and our elders hold us in that role as well, as they do in many communities, right? I gotta give another shout out to Dance Safe. You know, thank you. Dance Safe is awesome. They provide risk reduction at the events that I work at and for many other communities, and I think they're amazing people. I just want to thank them a lot. Because some of our community comes from burner culture, we practice leave no trace. We're not exactly doing that here, but we're going to do our best to sort and honor our garbage, right? Be nice to the land. Thank you. We also value participation, not spectating, radical self-reliance, but ask for help if you need it. These are values, right, that we can embrace, right? And it's also really important to acknowledge that when we work with our own communities, we're doing shadow work, right? We're doing a lot of shadow work, and I want to thank Ann Shulgin again for addressing the shadow work, right? Yeah, we need to work. We all have shadows. I have my shadow. Y'all have your shadows. We need to work on our shadows. As Ann told us yesterday, this is the most important work. We all have to do it, right? We all have to do it. She's a really wise woman. We are really grateful to her for coming in. That was a special favor, you all. You know that, right? We all got shadows to work on, and this is the most important thing that we need to address. And I want to say just a few more things about how we address shadow work in the communities I've been working with. We've been co-creating a series of these protocols to deal with conflict, right? And conflict takes place in all communities. We're all dealing with our shadows, and when our shadows result in behavior that brings us into conflict, which happens all the time, it happened here this weekend, it's part of our lives, we need to each community has a right to create a system to address that conflict. We've addressed it in the communities that I work with, and I think that we need to co-create a system to address it in this community as well. And it's going to be hard work, but it's absolutely essential. So after studying different systems of conflict resolution, we came on some really basic ideas for how any community can set up a system of conflict resolution. And again, this is not like, here's how to do it. It's just, these are some ideas that your community can embrace that can reflect your values. And they're actually based in traditional conflict resolution systems. The first thing is that whatever conflict resolution thing you're doing, it has to reflect the values of your own community, right? It has to uphold accountability, consent, respect, support for harmed parties, healing, risk reduction, and resiliency. I'm really into radical resiliency, right? How can I be radically resilient, right? We're in this for the long haul. This is not a short-term project, right? And then we need to focus, that community needs to focus on the safety concerns in that community to address actions, allegations that might compromise the safety of those participants. And each community has a right to do this. I'm part of a community that has set up a group of mediators that mediates year-round. They do a couple of events a year, but they mediate year-round. And I think a good group of mediators can and should do this. So in the communities I work with, these communities decide who in their community are the most respected leaders. Who are the most respected leaders, and they invite them to form a mediation team. Respected elders. This is a really old idea. This is like the village elders. This is a traditional idea, right? Select 4 or 5 people in your community who are respected elders, and then empower them to mediate conflict within that community that reflects your own values. It's a really simple idea, and it actually works. And then decide which kinds of actionable concerns you're going to consider in your mediation. In the communities I work with, physical and sexual assault, coercion, harassment, consent violations, these are all things that this group of mediators addresses. Because the alternative is impunity, and I'm tired of impunity, right? Human rights starts at home, we all know that. So we have to create systems that address impunity from within our own communities, right? And what kind of situations is the mediator or mediation team not going to address? You know, you have to set boundaries, right? We're going to address these issues. We're not going to address these other kinds of issues, right? So you'll remember, mediators are a very precious resource, and they have limited energies. So if you're going to form a mediation team, treat them like a precious resource. It's really, really important. And then the mediators need to set up a process that is transparent to the community itself. How do you deal with complaints? In some communities, they have an email address. You can email the mediators a description of your complaint, or how you've been transgressed, or how you have been harmed in a situation. They can take that in an email. They can arrange for a meeting with one of the mediators to take notes. They can do it in a phone call, whatever works for your community. Make a record of the complaint. Be specific in what kind of transgression, what kind of harm has taken place. Write it down so that the other mediators can share that information. And then meet with the subject of the complaint. Go to both sides. It has to be fair. You have to go to the other side, the person or group against whom that complaint is made, and gather information from them, right? Write it down. We're creating our own systems of justice that reflect our own communities, because most of us don't trust the criminal justice system, right? It's racist, and it's been incarcerating us for years, right? So we have to kind of create our own systems. But there's an aspect of fairness to hear from both sides, ask clarifying questions. If there are witnesses or outside information, gather that, write it down, share it with the mediators, and then decide. Decide what you're going to do, right? Are you going to take no action? Are you going to ask people to go into counseling? Are you going to ask them to temporarily set aside from your event or your gathering for a period of time? Are you going to take steps to reintegrate them back into the community? I want to do a special shout out to the counselors and therapists at CIIS. we have reached out to them and worked with that community of counselors and therapists because they don't discriminate against you for the kind of sex you have or the kind of drugs you do, right? And so we reach out to them and we ask them to support us, and we refer people out to that community of therapists for mediation, for counseling, and for support. And then, you know, even though you have a team of mediators, you have to manage cases. If you're going to put somebody through an education process, make sure the mediators aren't the same people who are bringing somebody through an educational process, because you'll burn them out. And you don't want to burn out your mediators. They're a precious resource. I hope that makes sense. So those are just some thoughts. It's not a perfect system. Each community is implementing it in different ways. And each community is trying to find a way to be radically resilient, to ask people to strike a careful balance between accepting that it's an unsafe world and creating the world we want to see, and being able to take responsibility for our own safety, and also ask the community to hold us and create a safer space, a safer world within the communities that we care about in a way that reflects our own values, right? And you know, some of the communities we've worked with have been doing this a couple of years. It's not perfect, but it's working pretty darn well. So if anybody has any more questions for me about that, we're going to publish some protocols. I'm mindful of the time, and I'll take a few questions, and I thank you for your patience. The mediation team has to reflect people within the community, people of color, queer people, disabled people, people of all generations. It has to be reflective of the community itself. And it has to be respected. It has to have credibility. But each community has a right to decide who those honored and wise people are. Each community makes that decision for themselves. We can't impose it, right? It can't be imposed. It's got to come from within. Does that help address your question? Great. More questions? Yes. Yeah, sure. I mean, yes. Sure.
So
yes.
Is this something that you travel to do?
Yes. Yes, I do. But can I say something? Like, I'm just like one person, like one flawed human. Like, I'm really not into the cult of personality thing, you know? I just like, I can send you like draft protocols also. It doesn't always have to be about me. And I want to make this clear that this is a co-creation. Like, I am not like the only person creating this. This has been a group effort. It's been going on for years. The big community I'm part of has been together for 6 years. There's 6,000 people in the community. It's big, you know. This is not about me. This is a group effort, and for you, I hope it can be a group effort too.
And since I happen to be holding a microphone, I thought I would say that we've already traveled to quite a few places, and we'd be happy to do some more. Just have to invite us and plan it.
I didn't even hear that. Could you say that?
I said because we've already traveled to quite a few places to present different WVC events, and we'd be happy to do some more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We would be happy to take this show on the road, and we have before in the U.S. and Canada. We were in Canada for several years because we knew that there were people who couldn't get U.S. visas, and we wanted to make sure that they had a right to be heard and gather, even if they couldn't get into the U.S. We did that for years. And we should keep doing that, because who knows, you know, what's going to happen in this country. So, any other questions? I'm mindful of the time, and I'm grateful for this time to speak. And I'll take any more questions, or you can talk with me individually afterwards. Questions, questions, questions. We want to be inclusive here for people's questions. Awesome.